Hello, and welcome to yet another episode of Air It Out with Connie. This week we take a trip up north to Zimbabwe, Kumusha, to the Sunshine City. And my guest today is Clive Mono Mukundu. Mono is a music producer, composer, author, and he is also a guitarist. And today we are talking about his books and the boy-child rights. We are, after all, in the Men's Month. Yes, to all the men out there, happy Men's Month. Stay tuned to Air It Out with Connie.
The views expressed in this episode are not of the production, the show, nor of the host, but of the guest. You as the listener have the right to make your own discretion.
Okay, just to begin, let us just hear from you. Who is Mono?
Okay, Mono is a Zimbabwean guitarist, music producer, and recently an author. I've written 3 books at the moment, and as a guitarist and music producer, I've got 33 years experience. I'm featured on more than 1,000 albums with local, regional, and a few international artists. I'm married to Jean. We've got 2 kids, Tariro, who is 27, and Taka, who is 22. My first book is Following the Melody, which I released 2017. It's about my biography and the mistakes that I made in the music industry and how they can be avoided. And the second book, which I released 2018, is called Poor and Famous. It talks about the problems that Zimbabwean musicians face, where they gain a lot of fame at the same time very poor. So it highlights those problems, how they can be avoided, and other issues. And then the third book is Main Vacuum. I wrote the book to celebrate my 50th birthday, and that was 2020. So I released it 2020 on my birthday. So it's a book that I wrote about the boy child, and my points, or my main focus was on how the boy child is now being neglected, whilst everybody is focusing on the girl child, because I've got 2 kids. One is a boy and one is a girl. And I feel that there's been too much emphasis on the girl child alone. And
Okay, just to begin, let us just hear from you. Who is Mono?
Okay, Mono is a Zimbabwean guitarist, music producer, and recently an author. I've written 3 books at the moment, and as a guitarist and music producer, I've got 33 years experience. I'm featured on more than 1,000 albums with local, regional, and a few international artists. I'm married to Jean. We've got 2 kids, Tariro, who is 27, and Taka, who is 22. My first book is Following the Melody, which I released 2017. It's about my biography and the mistakes that I made in the music industry and how they can be avoided. And the second book, which I released 2018, is called Poor and Famous. It talks about the problems that Zimbabwean musicians face, where they gain a lot of fame at the same time very poor. So it highlights those problems, how they can be avoided, and other issues. And then the third book is Main Vacuum. I wrote the book to celebrate my 50th birthday, and that was 2020. So I released it 2020 on my birthday. So it's a book that I wrote about the boy child, and my points or my main focus was on how the boy child is now being neglected, whilst everybody's focusing on the girl child, because I've got 2 kids. One is a boy and one is a girl. And I feel that there's been too much emphasis on the girl child alone, and the boy child is being neglected.
Okay, talking about neglect, in your own opinion, who is supposed to focus on the boy child?
The parents and the society as well. The same people who are focusing on the girl child alone are the same people who are supposed to focus on both genders. Because bad things happen to both genders. It's not the girl child alone who is in danger. Even the boy child is in danger too. So I think what we need to do is to balance and focus on both genders, because bad things happen to both genders. It's not just the girl child alone who needs attention. The boy child needs attention too.
This is Tebogo Chulugi, and you are listening to Air It Out with Connie.
Yeah, it's always difficult for men to speak out, and it has nothing to do with society or anything. It's I think it's just biological. Men are just not good at speaking out for themselves or showing their feelings. And I know a lot of people always say it's how we are raised, it's society and socialization, but it has nothing to do with society and socialization. I think we give too much credit to socialization. Men are just created that way. Men are not that open as much as women are open. So my point is that those organizations, those government organizations, those civic organizations that stand for human rights or for the girl child are the same organizations that are supposed to stand for both sides. Because right now we are talking about men. These are men who are already grown up already. What about the boys? Because the problems are mainly my ages actually kids who are still, like, for example, kids who are still in primary school and kids who are still growing up. So that's why the problem is mainly. So my point is those civic organizations, those government organizations that are standing for girl rights are the same organizations that are supposed to stand for the boy rights as well. So there should be a balance. So here in Zimbabwe, there's a case where a woman had a sexual relationship with an underage boy, and when the case was taken to court, the case was dismissed because they said the boy was a willing participant.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was dismissed simply because they said the boy was a willing participant, even though he was underage. But try to flip it and put a case where it's a girl who has had a sexual relationship with an older man. There will be a lot of noise from women's rights groups, from girl rights groups. But just because it was a man or it was a boy, it was simply brushed off and ignored, and it just ended just like that.
Because we cannot say one gender is more important than the other.
This is exactly what is happening.
Gender
right
equality.
Now.
This is what's the meaning of gender equality, when both genders are treated the same. If it's underage on the other side, it must be underage on the other side as well.
Exactly.
And then people
Yeah, they just kept quiet. No one spoke about it. And because if you label yourself as a girl rights groups, I've noticed that there's a tendency for such groups to totally ignore and turn a blind eye when it has to do with a boy child.
And I think, like, you're raising a very important point. If it's a child, it must just be a child, whether it's a girl or a boy.
Exactly. Because I think what's making the problem to escalate is the fact that it's more these days. It's more like a girls' rights business or women's rights business, because people are just starting these organizations to make money.
Yeah, that's true.
It has nothing to do with taking care of the girl child or taking care of the boy child or taking care of human rights. It's all about money. So it's now a woman's rights business right now. That's why you notice that they've got zero compassion on the boy child. They're just concentrating on the girl child. And at times they blow some stories out of proportion just to get attention so that they get money.
And which is not right. Using children in this manner. And I'm also looking at some men who could be standing up. They decide to be girl child activists. What about the boy? Men are abused too.
Yeah, even in my book, I wrote a chapter where I mentioned how I was also abused as a child. And where once you're abused as a child, you have the scars for life. And up to now, I still have the scars. And I remember when I was young, every time I tried to talk about it, no one took me serious, and no one even paid attention. So the only time that I decided to speak about it fully was in my book, because everywhere else, everybody was ignoring the story just because I'm a boy, and some people saw it as an adventure instead of abuse. So that's what always happens when it involves the boy child. Some people just take it as an adventure or as part of growing up, and it's not taken as abuse, but the scars remain, and the scars won't go away just because you are a boy. Abuse is abuse.
Would you like to tell us more about your experience?
It was when I was still before my teens, I think. I remember one time we stayed at a certain house here in Harare, and my mother had separated from my father, so she used to go on trips. Sometimes she would go away for 2 weeks and leave us in the care of our neighbors. We were renting a single room in a big house. So some of the ladies who used to live there, especially the landlady and the sister, a number of times they tried to sleep with me. They would enter the bathroom when I was bathing and dress in front of me, and trying to sleep with me, and they touch me inappropriately, and I had no one to tell. And I remember every time I would go to the bathroom, because the bathroom door was it had no key. So what you needed to do was to knock at the door, and then the person inside would tell you, no, it's occupied, and then you go. So every time my mother was not around, when I was alone, and they would knock, I would say, it's occupied. They say, it's you. And then they'll just enter, and I'll be bathing naked. And they will enter, take off their clothes, and a lot of things happened during that time. And my parents were separated, and it was difficult for me to tell my mother what was happening. Sometimes they will enter when I'm sitting alone in the room. They will start touching me inappropriately, and they would dismiss it as chiramo. But I think it was over. I think it was excessive chiramo, and we can't call it chiramo when you are not related. And even our chiramo culture in Zimbabwe doesn't go to the extent of someone touching someone's privates, and they tried a lot of things to try to force me to sleep with them. And when I refused, I remember they would say a lot of nasty things like, "You are not a real man. You'll never be able to satisfy any woman. You are very weak.
But you are still a boy. How can you be a man? They expected you to be a man, and you're a boy."
Exactly. So after that, I started just thinking myself as less of a man, because they would say, "You are not a real man. You'll never be able to satisfy a woman." So the first time I started going out with girlfriends when I was grown up, I was just feeling inferior, just thinking, maybe I'm not a real man. I won't be able to satisfy any woman. And those words that they used to say to me, they stayed with me for a long time. And I remember every time they used to enter when I was bathing, like the landlady, the husband was a soldier. So I used to think to myself, what if the husband comes in and finds me naked, standing next to his woman who is naked? What will happen? So every time she knocked on the door, I remember my heart would beat very fast. I ended up every time I was sort of like traumatized. Every time knocked on the door, even if it was somebody else, I remember my heart would beat very fast. And that same problem stayed with me. I remember the first time I had a girlfriend. As soon as we were alone, when there was nobody around, I remember my heart would just start beating very fast. And I was wondering, where did this problem come from? And then I remember, okay, it's coming from the time when I was still a boy, when those women they tried to abuse me. So at first I thought it was not abuse because we didn't do anything in the end. But later on, after reading books, I noticed that for an adult to take off his or her clothes in front of a child, it's also abuse, even if there's no contact. Yeah, so that's what happened on my part.
That is very sad, but how did you eventually get over this? I think it took a long time to heal, but if we go through the process.
I think as Africans, we've got a lot of traumas that are not addressed. A lot of traumas, different types of traumas. So in my case, it was never addressed. So it's just something that I just started figuring out after reading books, because I love reading books. And I remember, like I said, every time I would be alone with a girl, my heart would start beating very fast. I would feel very insecure, and I would be asking myself a lot of questions. Then I started reading books, trying to find out where my problem was. That's when I noticed that the problems were coming from what happened when I was still a kid. Because I didn't know that if something happens to you when you are still a kid, it can stay with you for life. I didn't know that. Yeah, that's when I discovered about it. So I tried to read a lot and try to find ways to help myself. But the issues were not 100% addressed. But at least after knowing where the problem was coming from, and after reading about traumas, I think I'm now better informed and in a better state of mind than before.
And we have many stories like yours, and some of the boys do the women, but why are we turning a blind eye when a 16-year-old boy is having a relationship with a 40-year-old woman, or a 15-year-old boy is having a sexual relationship with a 30-year-old woman? Why are we turning a blind eye? He's still a child. He's not capable of making decisions, just like the girl child. When are we going to have organizations that stand up for just children and not specifically a girl or a boy? A child is a...
Yeah, it's going to take time, because right now everybody's just talking about the girl child, and it's now a serious problem. Like in my case, I was 11 that time. I was 11, and it was I was still very young. I remember a woman locked the doors. She called me like she wanted to ask me something. As soon as I entered, she locked the door and told me that I was going to sleep in a room, and then she took off her clothes. I was a boy, I was just 11. And I remember when somebody knocked, she went to open the door, and then I just ran out and slipped out. And the following day, she was shouting at me, "You are not a real man, you are very weak, blah, blah, blah. You refuse to sleep with me." And she would say the same thing over and over and over again. And it really tormented me.
At 11, I'm sorry to say this, but I can't imagine. 11-year-old, what satisfaction can an 11-year-old give you?
It's very strange. It's very strange. I think it's just the same thing with those men that abused young girls as well. Because you start to wonder what type of satisfaction can you get from somebody who is still that young. But I think it's just a mental illness.
Really, it is. You see, there's a picture that went viral on social media. They say the guy is from Zimbabwe and he goes to the apostolic, Joan Masowe, I think, apostolic sect.
Yeah.
The guy is huge. He's a big man. Even me, I don't think I would survive under that huge mass. And he's holding a small girl, probably 10 years or 11 years or the most 12 years. And is this not being an animal? Is this not being beastly? How are we doing it?
When it comes to religious sects like the Mapostories, there are a number of those sects that are very dangerous. Some of those cults are very dangerous because they are very secretive and they never let any information out. And above all, they are politically connected, so they get away with anything and everything. It's only because that case was publicized due to social media. But if it were not because of social media, it would just have been swept under the rug, just like all the other cases. So when it comes to Mapostory sects, there's a huge problem with those churches because a lot happens in those churches.
And in some cases, the people part to all this rubbish.
Yeah, they'll be part of it because it's a faith-based. So especially those churches that believe that God speaks to their leaders, anything can happen in those churches because once the leader says, "The Lord spoke to me and God said this and that," no one is going to question them. So such churches are very dangerous. You need to question everything. Even if somebody says God spoke to them, you need to question them because there's no proof that God really spoke to them. So you can't just say amen to anything.
And it's really quite ignorance, because if you know the kind of things that God is bound to say and bound not to say, you wouldn't fall for just anything.
Yeah, but those people, they're the same people who tell you that the things of God do not require reasoning. And you wonder where they find such verses in the Bible. Because there are some verses in the Bible there are many verses in the Bible that supports reasoning, like come let's reason together. And my people perish because of lack of wisdom. They don't perish because of lack of faith. God doesn't say come let's have faith together. He says come let's reason together. And reasoning is thinking.
I didn't know that you use scripture.
Yeah, I know scripture a lot.
And you know, throughout this whole discussion, I'm actually realizing that our government is really letting us down. The law is letting us down. If it wasn't for social media, if it wasn't for the society, some of the things would just go unnoticed. And those ones that don't get any noise from social media, they also are just left like under the carpet.
Yeah, they're just left like that. So it's really a problem, especially the boy child issue. Because there's program that's known as a Program for International Student Assessment, PASA. They published a report on the 21st of November 2017, and their report was stating that boys are lagging behind girls in all academic fields in more than the largest developed nations. So it's things that people are not noticing, but it's happening. Because it sounds like a small issue there, but it's a very big issue, because right now everybody's concentrating on one side and the other side is and if you check suicide rates around the world, they are shooting, and it's mostly men that are committing suicide.
And it's just like what you have just mentioned now. It's like the woman is somehow advancing a lot. You are seeing more women taking up political positions, more women doing that, more women doing that. Are we doing it because the women have suddenly become more appropriate for the position? Is it just because of gender that we are there in those positions, or is it because we are qualified enough? I think
that's a very good question. That's a very good question, because right now what we are calling equality is women's superiority. That is what we are calling equality, but that's not equality. That's not the definition of equality. Because one should be employed on the basis of merit, not just because one is of this gender. The woman one should be one should be employed because of merit. Things
that we are coming out with these days, like just looking at someone, is a woman here, she said that, or he said that, or what. It's also making it difficult for progress in our society, because in the end we have people in power or in positions of leadership, but they are not competent. Someone can be there because of gender or because of race or because, and it's not, that's why we end up having lawmakers or people who are supposed to organization leaders, but they are not really dealing with real issues.
Because once you appoint somebody who is not qualified, you will not get the best results. One should be employed because of merit, not because of gender.
Now, coming back to the point of the boy child, what can we do? From now, we have seen the problem. We have seen the boy child is really being neglected. For example, we are in November, and November is the Men's Month. We are having International Men's Day. I posted on my Facebook page, my Facebook timeline. I asked, do you know there is an International Men's Day? What are you planning for this day? I got zero response. And I have a lot of men on my timeline, but nobody said anything. And then we come out to say men are not being celebrated. But who must celebrate the men if you men, you are not supporting the ones who are trying to celebrate you?
I think it's just now instilled in us that no one cares, so we just ignore it. But I think right now what we just need to do for the sake of progress is just to make sure that we balance things, and also accept nature and stop dismissing nature as socialization. Because there are many things which are now being dismissed as socialization. Because I was reading an article that was saying that even scientists are now afraid to say out their findings because of fear of being labeled sexist. Because there are obvious differences between men and women, but these days if you mention them, you can be cancelled. So I think for the sake of progress, we just need to know that basically men and women are different, and we are supposed to celebrate those differences. And those differences doesn't mean that this side is weaker or this side is better. It just means that we're just supposed to complement each other. Because that idea of thinking that this sex is is superior to the other one because they are better at this is one problem that is affecting us. We should just differences are there so that we complement each other. It doesn't mean that this side is weaker or this side is stronger. We're just supposed to complement each other.
That is very true. Men and women, we were created different, and we need to complement each other. And I think also as individuals, whether you're a man or you're a woman, as an individual, if you know you are having issues with something, then there is need to address and not end up like we are seeing a lot of men killing women, men raping, men doing this. I think there are so many issues that some men don't want to address in their lives, and then things are building up inside. You end up taking them out as anger or as something else, and you end up even committing suicide.
Like in the case of countries like South Africa, because in South Africa you find that the number of rape cases are way much higher than we have in Zimbabwe, and the number of cases where men kill their women are very high in South Africa as compared to Zimbabwe. And if you take a look at the problem closely, you notice that in South Africa they've got a problem with violence which they deal with on. So, like for example, if you look at how people are robbed in the streets and no one is helping, and when there's xenophobia, both men and women they unite and start killing foreigners. Is that violence which they are ignoring, which comes back as domestic violence again? It's the same violence. So in short, countries like South Africa where you are, they're just supposed to deal with violence as a whole. Violence, and is that same violence that comes back as domestic violence, is violence where men kill their wives or boyfriends kill their girlfriends. They should stop it or deal with it from the grassroots level, like political xenophobia and violence against foreign nationals and so forth. Because when there's xenophobia, you find even women they'll be participating and they'll be condoning it. Now, when it comes to when the men start killing their women, they start saying it's the problem with the men, but it's a national problem. Like in countries like South Africa, violence is just a national problem which should just be dealt with on a national level.
Yeah. Good violence, and now suddenly it's bad violence. Violence is violence. Crime is crime.
Yeah, violence is violence. Yeah. So if you condone it and clap hands when foreigners are being killed, it's the same violence that is going to come back and they start killing their women. Because in Zimbabwe, our culture in Zimbabwe, a woman is a god. You know, in Zimbabwe, even as children, we are told that you can fight with your father, but you can never beat your mother because there's a spiritual punishment called Kutanda Botso, and you are told to respect women, and it's part of our culture. When in Zimbabwe, I was speaking to my grandmother who was more than 100 years old. She was telling me that domestic violence started when the country was colonized, when the men were being abused at work, so they'd come back home and start abusing their wives. But generally, our culture, men were told that even when you are going to hunt, if you leave your wife angry, you have bad luck on your journey. So, in some sense, in our culture, women were treated as gods. So it's different. Of course, it's different with other cultures. Like in South Africa, every time I read or watch South African news, I always hear about women being killed, women being beaten up. Of course, here and there it happens in Zimbabwe, but not on the same scale with South Africa. So basically, I think South Africa needs to deal with their violence issues at grassroots level.
Just like our governments anywhere in Africa, people are not dealing with the real issues. The political parties, the leaders, they are not dealing with the real issues. That is why Africa, we are where we are now. And if we don't stop now to retrace our steps and look where we are going and where we are coming from, I don't know what kind of future we have in Africa. There are so many issues that we are just ignoring. We think that if we don't talk about it or we don't address it, then it will disappear.
Doesn't it? Yeah, true. True.
Clive.
Yeah, there are to be dealt with.
Before we call it a day, I'll more about the music industry in Zimbabwe. How have you been affected with the lockdowns and also with the technology? Is it the same as how things were long before the technology and the COVID? How is the situation there on the Zimbabwean industry?
Okay, first of all, Zimbabwean music industry doesn't pay as much music industries in other countries. Firstly, we've got a very small population. Like, for example, in Zimbabwe, our population is just 15 million. In South Africa, it's more than 60 million. Same thing with Tanzania, same thing with Nigeria. They've got 200 million people. So you find that everywhere where music pays a lot, they've got very big populations. In Zimbabwe, our population is very small. Then number two, our people, their wages, which they are paid is very little. They are paid very little. Like, for example, professional teachers in Zimbabwe, what they are paid is less than $50. So because people don't have a disposable income, they won't have much money to pay for entertainment. So as a result, our music doesn't pay much in Zimbabwe. But the situation was made worse when digital technology came along and there was high levels of piracy. And because of high levels of piracy, we no longer have marketing companies, we no longer have record labels. So without record labels, it means the artists have to pay for their own studio time. They have to market their music without expertise, without the machinery. Then on top of that, last year we were affected with COVID up to now. And shows were stopped. So the situation is really bad when it comes to music in Zimbabwe. And music has never been a high-earning profession in Zimbabwe. But things have gotten worse over time, especially with the bad economy and with the closure of record labels and marketing companies. Now with COVID, it's now even worse. So I always advise musicians with that small amount that we earn, it can make sense if you are able to save it and invest it. Because we've got a problem where somebody makes a breakthrough, all of a sudden is buying expensive cars, is trying to live large and impress people, and at the end of the day they are not saving anything, and then when things turn around they don't even have any savings. So I'm always advising musicians to save money, to invest, and also to have other streams of income rather than to depend on music alone, because music in Zimbabwe doesn't pay much.
And in Zimbabwe, in the music industry, still on there, do you have problems with drug abuse?
We have that problem a lot, especially with the youngsters. Because, like I'm saying, with music in Zimbabwe doesn't pay much. But people don't want to hear such statements, because I remember last time I was heckled when I mentioned that music in Zimbabwe doesn't pay that much. So artists must save money, they must invest, and they must have side hustles. People don't want to hear that, because I was accused of discouraging musicians, of telling musicians to be less dedicated to music, because they think that having a side hustle means you are less dedicated to music. So I was telling them, look at people like Beyonce, she's got a clothing line, Jay-Z has got a wine company, P. Diddy has got a wine company. Does it mean that they are less dedicated to music? Music is a gamble, and a clever gambler as a backup plan. So the moment that they start realizing that music is not paying them as much as they expected, most of them, they end up abusing drugs because of frustration. And right now we've got so many cases in Zimbabwe. With so many cases. And another thing is in Zimbabwe, I think it is the case everywhere. You know, everybody knows a thing or two about the music industry because everybody listens to music, everybody goes to music shows and so forth. But it's only those people that are in the music industry who understands what happens in the music industry. And one of the things that takes people backwards or that causes problems is the idea that most young people, they think that if they copy music from Nigeria, if they copy music from South Africa or from America or from Jamaica, that will make them international, and at the end of the day, they'll be big around the world. But if you look at our music industry, no one has ever made serious progress or lasting progress with foreign music. So if you try to tell them such things, you'll be labeled a hater or somebody who is backward. But if you look at our music industry history, both music industry in Zimbabwe, it started in 1930. Up to now, there's not even a single person who has made any meaningful progress with foreign music. But if you try to tell them to youngsters, you've been in serious trouble. So it's such things that will end up coming back to haunt us, and then end result, people start taking drugs and so forth.
Oh, that is very sad, and it's really true. There is no way you can say I'm fine. I don't need a side hustle, especially the art industry, especially the arts.
It's a gamble. Because a clever gambler is a backup plan. Because you can't just survive on gambling. Because the days differ. Another day you make money, another day there's nothing. So that's why I'm always telling the youngsters, please save your money and stop status signaling. Status signaling is that idea of trying to show everybody that you've made it. Because right now, all the youngsters that made it a few years ago from last year going backwards, they all drive Mercedes-Benz cars. They're all trying to live large to show everybody that they've got money. But every time there's a problem, they go bankrupt. They have to ask for help from the public, and it gives a bad name to the music industry. We need to accept the fact that the music industry in Zimbabwe is a low-income industry. That's a fact that we cannot run away from. Since it's a low-income industry, of course, here and there, you can make it, or you can make some money here and there. When you make that money, try to invest it and put it to good use, rather than buy a very expensive car and then try to live large. Because right now, a lot of those youngsters, they end up dating older women who are financially stable, so that they maintain that image. Then, but at the end of the day, if they have a fallout, I'm sure you've noticed the number of those women Facebook, going live on Facebook, telling everybody, I'm the one who was buying his stocks, I'm the one who was buying his cars and so forth. And then they are put to shame. So it's a problem, but it's a problem that can be addressed, but no one wants to listen to you, especially if you are not as famous as they are. Especially people like me, we work in the background. We are not as famous as the guys who handle the microphones. So we are the most unknown famous people.
I have always said music producers, they are the unsung heroes of song. And I always think of people like Bothonya Mondera, people who are uncelebrated, and yet they contributed a lot to the music industry. But you do have your own albums, right? Isn't it? I think I know Gwenyambira.
Gwenya Guitar. Yeah, I do. I've got about 9 albums. But with me, I don't want to lie to myself. I'm not a good singer. So,
but you're very good guitarist.
I'm a guitarist, I'm a composer. But what I do is I don't want to let what I cannot do stop me from what I can do. So what I do is when I release my albums, it's just a way of marketing my studio and marketing my sound. It's not like I'm trying to be an artist standing on his own, because I know that I'm not a good singer. My strength is playing guitar and composing and producing. So when I record my music, it's not it's just for the sake of marketing my sound, marketing the studio, and just making sure that my name is a way of growing my name. You see, so my strength is with playing instruments and production. So basically, that's what I concentrate on. But of course, here and there, I release my music, but it's not for the purposes of me being a solo artist. I know that I'm not a good singer, so I concentrate more on what I can do.
Yeah. And just to round up, how can people get hold of your books?
Right now, we no longer have publishing companies in Zimbabwe. The few publishing companies that we have are now concentrating on educational books and curriculum books, because that's what selling. That's what giving them profit. So most people like me are just self-publishing. So they just have to contact me on my social media platforms or on my mobile number. I've got soft copies and hard copies as well. Let's
just say a few words, your very final words before we say goodbye.
Okay, I would just like to say to everybody, bad things happen to both genders, so don't neglect the boy child, and make sure that you are being fair to both genders. So
Air It Out with Connie.
Mono, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an honor having you, and it was quite an interesting discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for introducing me to podcasting. It's my very first time on a podcast.
You are welcome.
I had problems connecting.
Welcome to podcasting.
Trying to research more about it, because it's very new to me. I always saw the name podcast everywhere, and I didn't know what a podcast is. So this is my very first podcast, and I'm going to research more and find out what happens.
All right, all the best with that, and with Mono Studios, everything with music, with your family. I wish you all the best, and greetings to Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Take care.
Okay.